Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a curious little girl named Goldilocks. She had golden hair that shimmered like sunlight and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Goldilocks lived in a cozy cottage at the edge of a magnificent forest with her loving grandmother. Every morning, her grandmother would braid her beautiful golden hair and tell her wonderful stories about the magical creatures that live deep in the woods. But Goldilocks was not like other children. She had an adventurous spirit that could never be satisfied. While other children played quietly in their gardens, Goldilocks would gaze longingly at the mysterious forest that stretched beyond their home. "Grandmother, what lies beyond those tall trees?" she would ask every single day. Her grandmother would smile gently and say, "My dear child, the forest is full of wonders, but it can also be dangerous. Promise me you will never venture too far from home." Goldilocks would nod and promise, but deep in her heart, she knew that one day she would explore every corner of that enchanted forest. She was simply too curious to stay put. One bright and sunny morning, Goldilocks woke up feeling more restless than usual. Her grandmother had gone to the village market to buy fresh bread and vegetables for their meals. "I will be back before sunset, my dear," her grandmother had said. "Please stay close to the cottage and do not wander off." Goldilocks had promised, but as soon as her grandmother disappeared down the winding path, that familiar feeling of adventure began to stir in her heart. She tried to keep herself busy by tidying up the cottage, but her eyes kept drifting to the forest. The trees seemed to be calling her name, whispering secrets that only she could hear. Finally, she could resist no longer. "Just a short walk," she told herself. "I will only go to the edge of the forest and come right back. What harm could there be in that?" So Goldilocks put on her favorite blue dress and her sturdy walking shoes. She grabbed a small wicker basket, thinking she might pick some wildflowers for her grandmother. With one last look at the cottage, she stepped through the garden gate and began walking toward the forest. The moment she entered the woods, Goldilocks felt as if she had stepped into another world. The trees towered above her like gentle giants, their branches creating a canopy of green that filtered the sunlight into dancing patterns on the forest floor. Birds sang melodious songs from every direction, and butterflies fluttered around her like tiny rainbows. The air smelled of pine needles, wild flowers, and something else she could not quite identify. "Oh, how beautiful this place is," Goldilocks whispered to herself. She began picking the most gorgeous flowers she had ever seen, each one more colorful than the last. There were deep red roses, bright yellow daisies, purple violets, and orange marigolds. Before she knew it, her basket was overflowing with the most magnificent bouquet. But as she continued walking, something extraordinary happened. A sweet, heavenly aroma began to fill the air. It was unlike anything Goldilocks had ever smelled before. It was warm and golden and made her mouth water instantly. She followed the scent deeper and deeper into the forest, completely forgetting her promise to stay close to home. What could smell so absolutely delicious? She wondered aloud. The aroma grew stronger with every step she took, leading her down a winding path she had never seen before. It twisted and turned through the trees, past babbling brooks and meadows filled with the most beautiful flowers. As she walked, Goldilocks began to notice something peculiar. The trees around her were different from the ones near her cottage. These trees were enormous, with thick trunks and branches that seemed to reach all the way to the clouds, and hanging from many of these branches were what looked like large, golden drops of pure sunshine. Suddenly, she realized what she was smelling. It was honey, the most incredible, sweet, golden honey she had ever encountered, and it was everywhere. The trees were covered with beehives, and busy bees were flying back and forth, working hard to create their liquid gold. "Oh my goodness," Goldilocks gasped with delight. "I have discovered a honey forest. This must be where all the honey in the world comes from." She had never seen so much honey in her entire life. Her grandmother had always told her that honey was more precious than gold, and here was an entire forest full of it. But as she stood there, marveling at the incredible sight, Goldilocks heard something that made her heart skip a beat. Heavy footsteps were approaching from somewhere behind the trees, not the light footsteps of a person, but the deep, thunderous steps of something much, much larger. Who could be walking through the forest making such loud sounds? She whispered to herself. She quickly hid behind a large oak tree, peeking out carefully to see what was coming. And then she saw them, 3 bears walking down the path toward her. But these were not ordinary bears. They were walking upright on their hind legs, just like people. The first bear was enormous, with dark brown fur and a deep, booming voice. The second bear was medium-sized with lighter brown fur and a gentler voice. The third bear was small and fluffy with golden fur that reminded Goldilocks of her own hair. Papa Bear, the smallest bear, was saying, "I am so hungry. When will we find some honey for our breakfast?" "Do not worry, baby bear," replied the largest bear in his deep, rumbling voice. "We are almost at the honey grove. There will be plenty of sweet honey for all of us." "But Papa," said the medium-sized bear, "what if someone has already taken all the honey? You know how much the other forest animals love it." "Mama Bear," Papa Bear chuckled, "the honey grove is our secret place. No one else knows about it. We have been going there for generations." Goldilocks listened to their conversation with growing excitement. A secret. Honey Grove. This was exactly the kind of adventure she had been dreaming about her whole life. She watched as the 3 bears continued down the path, and when they were far enough away, she began to follow them quietly. The bears led her deeper into the forest than she had ever imagined possible. They walked for what seemed like hours, past streams and meadows, through thick groves of trees, and over little wooden bridges. All the while, the sweet scent of honey grew stronger and stronger. Finally, they reached a clearing that took Goldilocks's breath away. In the center of the clearing stood the most magnificent tree she had ever seen. It was taller than any building, with a trunk so wide that it would take 20 people holding hands to reach around it. And covering every branch of this incredible tree were hundreds and hundreds of beehives, each one dripping with the most golden, delicious honey imaginable. "Welcome to the honey grove," Papa Bear announced proudly. "This tree has been providing honey for our family for over 100 years. "Oh, Papa," Baby Bear exclaimed, jumping up and down with excitement. "Can we start collecting honey right now? I am so very hungry." "Of course, my little one," Mama Bear said sweetly. "But remember, we must always be respectful of the bees. They work very hard to make this honey, and we must only take what we need." Goldilocks watched in fascination as the bear family began their honey collecting routine. Papa Bear climbed up the enormous tree trunk with surprising grace for such a large creature. Mama Bear gathered large wooden bowls from a hollow in the tree, and Baby Bear danced around excitedly, singing a little song about honey and sunshine. But as she watched them, Goldilocks felt her stomach begin to rumble loudly. She had been walking for so long that she had worked up quite an appetite, and that honey looked absolutely irresistible. "I wonder if they would notice if I took just a tiny bit," Goldilocks whispered to herself. The honey looked so golden and perfect, dripping slowly from the combs like liquid sunshine. Her mouth watered as she imagined how sweet and delicious it would taste. She watched as Papa Bear carefully selected a large comb from high up in the tree. With his powerful paws, he gently squeezed the honeycomb, letting the thick golden honey flow into a wooden bowl that Mama Bear held steady below. The sound it made was like music, a soft, dripping melody that made Goldilocks even hungrier. "This honey is perfect," Papa Bear called down to his family. "Sweet and rich, just the way we like it." "Oh, how wonderful," Mama Bear replied. "Baby Bear, come here and taste this." She dipped her finger into the bowl and offered it to the little bear. Baby Bear licked the honey, and his eyes grew wide with delight. "Mama, this is the most delicious honey I have ever tasted. It tastes like sunshine and flowers and happiness all mixed together." Goldilocks could barely contain herself. She had never wanted anything so badly in her entire life. The honey looked so perfect, so golden, so absolutely irresistible. Surely the bears would not mind if she took just a tiny taste. After all, there was so much honey in this magical tree that they would never even notice. Very quietly, Goldilocks began to creep closer to the clearing. She moved from tree to tree, being as silent as a mouse. The bears were so busy with their honey collecting that they did not notice the little girl watching them from the shadows. As she got closer, she could hear the busy buzzing of hundreds of bees flying around the great tree. They moved in perfect patterns, some flying up to the hives, others flying down to the wildflowers in the meadow. It was like watching a beautiful dance, with each bee knowing exactly what to do. "Look how hard the bees are working," Mama Bear said to Baby Bear. "They visit thousands of flowers every day to make this honey for us. That is why we must always be grateful and never take more than we need." "I understand, Mama," Baby Bear replied. "The bees are our friends, and we must always treat our friends with kindness." Goldilocks thought about what Mama Bear had said. She knew it was important to be respectful and not take things that did not belong to her. But the honey smelled so incredibly good, and she was so very hungry. Surely just one tiny taste would not hurt anyone. She watched as Papa Bear climbed down from the tree, carrying 3 wooden bowls filled with honey. One bowl was very large, one was medium-sized, and one was quite small. He set them down on a flat rock in the middle of the clearing. "Here we are," Papa Bear announced. "Fresh honey for our family breakfast." "Thank you, Papa," Mama Bear said gratefully. "This honey will give us energy for our long walk back home." "And it will make my tummy happy, too," Baby Bear added with a giggle. The 3 bears sat down around the rock and began to eat their honey with wooden spoons. They ate slowly and carefully, savoring every single drop. Goldilocks watched them with growing fascination. They looked so content and happy, enjoying their simple meal together in the beautiful forest clearing. But then something unexpected happened. A large blue butterfly landed on Baby Bear's nose, making him sneeze loudly. Achoo! The sneeze was so sudden and so loud that all 3 bears jumped up in surprise. "Goodness me," Mama Bear exclaimed. "That was quite a sneeze, Baby Bear." "I am sorry, Mama," Baby Bear said, rubbing his nose. "The butterfly tickled me." Papa Bear chuckled deeply. "Well, that certainly woke us up. But now I think we should start heading back home. The sun is getting higher in the sky, and we have a long journey ahead of us." "But Papa," Baby Bear said sadly, "I have not finished my honey yet." "Do not worry, little one," Mama Bear said gently. "We can take the honey with us and finish it on our way home." Goldilocks watched as the bear family began to pack up their things. They carefully covered the remaining honey with large leaves to keep it fresh. Papa Bear gathered up some extra honeycombs to take home for later. Mama Bear made sure Baby Bear had everything he needed for the journey. "Now remember," Papa Bear said, as they prepared to leave, "we must always keep the location of the honey grove secret. This special place has been in our family for generations, and we must protect it." "I promise, Papa," Baby Bear said solemnly. "I will never tell anyone about our secret place." "Good," Mama Bear said with a smile. "Now let us begin our journey home." Goldilocks watched as the three bears walked away from the clearing, carrying their precious honey with them. She waited until their footsteps faded completely before she dared to move from her hiding place. Finally, she was alone in the magical honey grove. The enormous tree stood before her like a golden palace, its branches heavy with the most delicious honey she had ever seen. Bees continued their busy work, flying in and out of the hives in perfect harmony. "Now is my chance," Goldilocks whispered to herself. She looked around carefully to make sure the bears were really gone. The forest was quiet except for the gentle buzzing of the bees and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. She approached the great tree cautiously, her heart beating fast with excitement. Up close, the tree was even more magnificent than she had imagined. The bark was smooth and warm to the touch, and the branches stretched so high above her that she could barely see the top. Near the base of the tree, she noticed something the bears had left behind. 3 wooden bowls sat on the flat rock, each one with a small amount of honey still in the bottom. The largest bowl had just a thin layer of honey coating the sides. The medium-sized bowl had a small puddle of golden sweetness in the center, and the smallest bowl still had several spoonfuls of honey left inside. "Oh my," Goldilocks gasped with delight. "They left some honey behind. Surely it would be all right if I just tasted what they could not finish." She looked around one more time to make sure she was completely alone. The bees continued their work, paying no attention to the little girl standing beneath their tree. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. Goldilocks approached the largest bowl first. She dipped her finger into the thin layer of honey and brought it to her lips. The moment the honey touched her tongue, her eyes grew wide with amazement. It was the most incredible taste she had ever experienced, sweet and rich and warm like sunshine made into liquid. But there was something else about this honey. It seemed to have a strange effect on her. As soon as she swallowed it, she felt a warm, tingling sensation spreading through her whole body. Her arms began to feel heavy and sleepy. "Oh dear," she said drowsily. "This honey is making me feel so very tired." She yawned widely and rubbed her eyes. "Perhaps I should try the honey from the medium-sized bowl instead." She walked over to the medium-sized bowl and carefully dipped her finger into the small puddle of honey in the center. This honey looked slightly different from the first one. It had a deeper golden color and seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Without hesitation, she brought it to her lips and tasted it. This honey was even more delicious than the first, but something very strange happened the moment she swallowed it. Suddenly, Goldilocks felt incredibly energetic. Her heart began to race, and she felt like she could run faster than the wind. Her hands started to shake with excitement, and she could not stand still. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed, bouncing up and down on her toes. "This honey is making me feel like I could climb the tallest mountain or swim across the widest river." She began to pace back and forth, unable to control her sudden burst of energy. "I feel like I could dance all day and all night without ever getting tired." But this feeling was almost too much for her. She felt jittery and restless, as if tiny lightning bolts were running through her veins. "Perhaps the honey in the smallest bowl will be just right," she said hopefully. Goldilocks approached Baby Bear's little bowl with great curiosity. This honey was lighter in color than the others, almost like liquid gold mixed with sunshine. It smelled absolutely divine, with hints of wildflowers and fresh spring air. She dipped her finger in and tasted it carefully. The moment this honey touched her tongue, Goldilocks sighed with pure contentment. This honey was absolutely perfect. It was sweet but not too sweet, warm but not too warm, and it made her feel completely satisfied and happy. It tasted like all the beautiful things in the world had been mixed together to create the most wonderful flavor imaginable. "Oh, this is absolutely delicious," she said with a huge smile. "This honey is just right." She took another spoonful, and then another. Before she knew it, she had finished every last drop in Baby Bear's bowl. As she set the empty bowl back on the rock, Goldilocks felt wonderfully content. Her stomach was full, and she felt perfectly comfortable and happy. The perfect honey had given her exactly what she needed, but now she felt pleasantly sleepy, and she began to look around for a comfortable place to rest. Near the base of the great tree, she noticed something she had not seen before. 3 cozy nests made of soft moss, and leaves were nestled between the large roots. They looked like the most comfortable beds she had ever seen. One nest was quite large, one was medium-sized, and one was small and perfectly round. "Those look like wonderful places to take a little nap," Goldilocks said with a yawn. "I will just rest for a few minutes before I head back home." She tried the largest nest first, but it was too hard and uncomfortable. The medium-sized nest was too soft, and she sank down too far. But when she curled up in the smallest nest, it was absolutely perfect. The soft moss felt like a cloud, and the sweet scent of honey and wildflowers surrounded her like a gentle hug. Within moments, Goldilocks was fast asleep, dreaming of golden honey and friendly bees dancing in the sunshine. But her peaceful sleep did not last long. She was awakened by the sound of familiar voices approaching the clearing. Her eyes flew open, and she realized with horror that the 3 bears had returned to their special place. "Someone has been eating our honey," Papa Bear said, in his deep, rumbling voice. "My bowl is completely empty." "Someone has been eating my honey too, Astama," Mama Bear added with concern. "And they finished almost all of it." "Someone has been eating my honey," Baby Bear cried out sadly, "and they ate it all up. There is nothing left." Goldilocks knew she had to get away immediately. She jumped up from the cozy nest and began to run as fast as her legs could carry her. Behind her, she could hear Baby Bear calling out, "And someone has been sleeping in my nest too." She ran and ran through the forest, following the winding path back toward her home. The trees seemed to blur together as she raced past them, her heart pounding with each step. She could hear the bears calling out behind her, but she did not dare to look back. Finally, after what felt like hours of running, Goldilocks saw the familiar sight of her grandmother's cottage through the trees. She burst through the garden gate just as her grandmother was returning from the market. "My dear child," her grandmother said with surprise, "you look as if you have seen a ghost. What has happened to you?" Goldilocks threw her arms around her grandmother and hugged her tightly. "Oh, grandmother, I have had the most incredible adventure. But I have also learned a very important lesson." As they walked into the cottage together, Goldilocks told her grandmother the whole story. She explained about following the bears, discovering the magical honey grove, and tasting the 3 different kinds of honey. She admitted that she had taken something that did not belong to her, and that she felt very sorry for what she had done. "My dear Goldilocks," her grandmother said gently, "I am glad you have learned that it is important to respect others and their belongings, but I am also proud of you for being honest about your mistake." From that day forward, Goldilocks never again took anything that did not belong to her, and whenever she felt the urge to go on another adventure, she always remembered to ask permission first. She had learned that the greatest adventures come not from taking what belongs to others, but from discovering the wonders of the world with kindness and respect. And though she never returned to the secret honey grove, Goldilocks never forgot the taste of that perfect honey or the important lesson it had taught her. She lived happily ever after, always curious about the world, but always mindful of treating others with the respect and kindness they deserved.